You're at a party. Someone walks up to you, shakes your hand, smiles, tells you their name, and 30 seconds later, it's gone. Completely, embarrassingly, irretrievably gone. And the worst part? You spent the next 20 minutes creatively avoiding saying their name out loud. Hey, you! So, what do you think? Meanwhile, your brain is sitting in the back of your skull like a forgetful intern who shredded the one document you actually needed. Sound familiar? Yeah, me too. Here's what most people assume when this happens. They think they're just bad at names, like it's some flaw in their character, some laziness of attention, some sign that they just don't care enough. But that's not what's happening, not even close. What's actually going on in your brain when a name slips through the cracks is one of the most fascinating stories in all of cognitive neuroscience, and understanding it might just change the way you see yourself entirely. Let's start with something that sounds almost insultingly simple. Names, as pieces of information, are uniquely, almost unfairly difficult for your brain to hold onto. And the reason why comes down to how memory actually works. Your brain doesn't store memories like files in a folder. It stores them like a web, a vast, tangled, beautiful web of associations. Every time you learn something new, your brain looks for threads to connect it to. Your memory of your childhood home isn't just a picture in your head. It's linked to the smell of your mother's cooking, the sound of a particular song, the feeling of a summer afternoon. That's why a single scent can flood you with a decade of memories in an instant. Your brain is an association machine. It remembers through connection. Now think about what happens when someone tells you their name. Hi, I'm Daniel. And your brain goes, searching. It looks for something to attach Daniel to. But a name, by itself, is what psychologists call an arbitrary label. It doesn't describe anything. It doesn't connect to anything. Daniel doesn't tell you how Daniel laughs, what he does for work, whether he's kind or funny or sad. It just floats there, untethered. And untethered things drift away. There's actually a well-documented phenomenon called the Baker-Baker paradox that illustrates this perfectly. Researchers found that if you tell someone, "This man is a baker," they're far more likely to remember that detail than if you tell them, "This man's last name is Baker." The word is identical, baker, but the concept of being a baker activates a whole web of associations: flour, bread, early mornings, warm kitchens. The name baker has none of that richness. It's just a sound, a label without a story. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because forgetting names isn't just about memory storage, it's also about attention. And attention, it turns out, is where your physiology gets really involved. Think about the moment someone introduces themselves to you. What's actually happening in your nervous system right then? You're scanning their face, you're picking up on their tone, their energy, their body language. You're deciding in real time whether this person is safe, interesting, relevant to you. Your amygdala, the brain's ancient threat detection system, is quietly running a background check. You're also managing your own social anxiety, thinking about what you're going to say next, wondering if your handshake was too firm or not firm enough. Your brain is doing so much in that single moment that the name, this tiny, arbitrary, connectionless label, barely gets a sliver of your attention. Neurologically speaking, for a memory to stick, it needs to go through a process called consolidation. Information travels from your working memory, which is essentially your brain's RAM, limited and temporary, through to long-term storage. And that process requires two things: depth of processing and emotional significance. A name that slips past you in a noisy introduction while your nervous system is buzzing with social stimulation almost never gets consolidated. It never makes the journey. It just evaporates. And some people's brains are wired to be more susceptible to this than others. Research has shown that highly empathetic people, those who are deeply attuned to the emotional experience of others, are often worse at remembering names, not because they care less, but because they care more. They're so focused on reading the person in front of them, on feeling the room, on being present in the emotional landscape of the conversation that the name doesn't even register as important information in the moment. They're consuming the human, not the label. Isn't that kind of beautiful in a way? People with higher levels of trait anxiety also tend to forget names more quickly. When your nervous system is slightly elevated, which for many people is just baseline existence in a social setting, your working memory literally narrows. Stress hormones like cortisol interfere with the hippocampus, the brain structure most responsible for forming new memories. So if meeting new people makes you even the tiniest bit nervous, your brain is already working against you before the introduction is even finished. There's also something worth understanding about the role of dopamine here. Your brain consolidates memories more effectively when it's in a state of reward and engagement. When something is exciting, meaningful, or surprising, dopamine floods the system and essentially says, "Hey, remember this." But a name, introduced in a standard social ritual without context, without story, rarely triggers that response. Your brain doesn't get a dopamine hit from, "Hi, I'm Karen." Unless Karen immediately says something extraordinary, that name is going to take the same exit ramp as everything else your brain deemed unmemorable. Now, here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The moment right after you hear a name is critical. Most people in that fraction of a second are already moving on, preparing their smile, their response, their own next sentence. But that moment is exactly when your brain needs to rehearse the name, even internally, to begin the consolidation process. Repetition is one of the few ways to force an arbitrary label into memory. And in modern social settings, we almost never do it. We don't repeat names. We don't use them immediately in conversation. We move on, and the name moves with us, out the door. So if you're someone who forgets names constantly, here's what I want you to hear. You are not broken. You are not rude. You are not self-absorbed. What you are is human, with a brain doing exactly what it was designed to do: filtering, prioritizing, associating. Your brain is choosing richness over labels, people over identifiers. It is, in its own strange and inconvenient way, paying the deepest kind of attention. That doesn't mean you can't get better at it. Associating a name immediately with a vivid mental image, repeating the name back naturally in conversation, connecting it to someone you already know. These are all strategies that work because they give your brain what it's craving: connection, story, meaning. You're essentially doing your brain's job for it, building the web by hand. But more than the strategies, I want to leave you with this. The next time you forget someone's name, instead of sinking into that familiar shame spiral, try asking yourself what you did remember about them. Chances are you remember the way their eyes crinkled when they laughed, or the uncertainty in their voice when they talked about something hard, or the way they lit up when they mentioned their kids. Your brain chose to keep those things. It found them worth holding on to. We live in a world that puts enormous weight on names, on labels, on titles, on identifiers. But your brain, in its ancient associative wisdom, is more interested in the shape of a person than the sound attached to them. And maybe that's not such a terrible thing. If this made you think about your own mind a little differently, drop a comment below. I'd genuinely love to know if this rings true for you, or if you're one of those rare people who remembers every name they've ever heard. And if you want to keep exploring the strange and beautiful mechanics of how your brain works, there's a lot more where this came from. Stick around.